Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Purging Jews from campuses and classrooms, restricting pro-Israel speech, and creating Jewish-free zones. A rash of anti-Semitic atrocities are taking places at colleges right here in America.
Well, members of Congress are speaking out, warning of the dangers of this appalling trend. Gary Lane reports on the breeding ground of anti-Semitism at the University of California, Berkeley.
Anti-Semitism is on the rise here in the United States, with hate crimes against Jews setting an all-time high last year. Most took the form of violent attacks and vandalism against synagogues and Jewish temples. This week on Capitol Hill, congressmen expressed concerns about a new wave of anti-Semitism infecting young American adults.
The substitution of the word Zionist for Jew has become the modus operandi of a new insidious strain of anti-Semitism that has taken hold in college campuses and on social media platforms.
During public demonstrations like this one, pro-Palestinian protesters call for Jews to be purged from college campuses and classrooms. And critics say that's exactly what has happened at the University of California, Berkeley, where some students have attempted to restrict pro-Israel speech. Berkeley Law School Dean Erwin Chemerinsky says a rash of media reports about Jewish-free zones are not true. He says only a handful of student organizations, fewer than 10 out of 100, have adopted anti-Israel bylaws, which include a ban against pro-Israel speakers. Berkeley Law School graduate Kenneth Marcus is founder and chairman of the Louis Brandeis Center for Human Rights. He calls Chemerinsky's response outrageous.
What if there had been any other context in which any other group was shut out of opportunities? Would a law school dean in the 21st century say, not to worry, it's okay to have 9 segregated areas, just so long as we have many other areas that aren't segregated?
Appearing on the CBN News program The Global Lane, Marcus described the speech ban as utterly absurd, ridiculous, and inconsistent with American law. So is this speech ban anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, or just anti-Israel?
Well, it's all of those. Pick your poison. To begin with, it is a method of silencing one side of a political debate. It is a way of saying we should not permit anyone to participate in a discussion on campus if they are pro-Israel.
American Jewish leaders fear what has started in California may easily spread to other parts of the country. Marcus says Jewish students are already being marginalized and excluded on other college campuses because of the Zionist aspect of their Jewish identity. Students at Rutgers University recently saw their fraternity house egged on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year.
We're seeing a general effort to marginalize and exclude the Jewish community, to create the notion that Jews and the Jewish community and establishment are simply not a normal part of life on college and university campuses. What's happening at Berkeley Law now is in some respects unique, but in some respects it is simply the latest in what is clearly a nationwide trend, and an ugly one.
And concerned leaders like Marcus and Congressman Torres believe only by standing up and speaking out can Americans reverse the growing tide of American anti-Semitism. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Well, this is a symptom of a much larger worldwide problem where the BDS movement, the boycott, divestment, sanction movement, which is funded by the Palestinians, it's been incredibly influential. I agree with Senator Ben Sasse, who says there is no functional equivalent at the UN between the Palestinians and the Israelis. The Israelis have a legitimate state recognized by the UN. The Palestinians have consistently rejected the UN mandate and have consistently rejected the call from the UN for them to form a separate state. They have always been against Israel. They've always tried to wipe Israel off the map. For this to be entertained on our college campuses, that you can't talk about Zionism, you can't talk about a Jewish homeland, you can't talk about the Jews having a right of self-determination, which has been part of international law since the League of Nations and the San Remo Conference of 1920. You look at the history and you go, well, how in the world can you ally with the Palestinian cause? It makes no sense. Here's the only way it makes sense, and it's a spiritual way. The rabbis say in every single generation, there rises a Haman who tries to wipe the Jews out. To see that happening in America, where we treasure freedom of religion, we treasure freedom of conscience, we treasure free speech and free assembly, where George Washington famously wrote a letter to a synagogue in Rhode Island, in America, you will be safe. These things are part of our history. Here at CBN, we stand with Israel. That's a fundamental for us. And it's not just because it's the right thing to do. My fear is that I've already studied the history. If you allow the Jews to be persecuted, if you allow the Jews to be rounded up into concentration camp, guess who's coming next? And in Nazi Germany, they came next for the Christians. A lot of people don't know this history. In 1942 and beyond, you could not preach the Bible in a church. You could only preach from Mein Kampf. That's how complete the control was. It's astounding that we don't know this history, but it's also astounding here in America, this kind of persecution is going on. We as Christians need to stand against it. It's the right thing to do. In other news, federal agents say they have enough evidence to file charges against Hunter Biden, and they're putting pressure on the Justice Department to do that. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. Government agents have been investigating Hunter Biden for years, and they think there's now enough sufficient evidence to charge him with tax crimes and a false statement related to gun purchase. That's according to reporting from The Washington Post. The investigation began back in 2018, centering on Biden's taxes and international business dealings, dating back to when his father served as vice president, and includes Hunter Biden's work serving on the board of a Ukrainian gas company. The decision whether to file charges will be made by the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, David Weiss. He's a holdover from the Trump administration. Well, Colorado Christian baker Jack Phillips is back in court. He won a partial victory at the Supreme Court after refusing to make a cake for a gay wedding on religious grounds. Now his attorney is urging the state's appeals court to overturn a ruling against him that said he violated the state's anti-discrimination law by refusing to make a cake celebrating a gender transition. The case was brought by a transgender woman. Phillips testified at trial last year he did not think someone could change genders, and he would not, quote, celebrate someone who thinks that they can, end quote. Well, gas prices are rising again, getting close to $4 a gallon, and they're expected to go up even more after OPEC countries said they would cut back on oil production. It all contributes to growing concerns about the world economy. Abigail Robertson has that story.
OPEC Plus's decision to drastically slash their oil production starting in November means Americans will soon pay more to fill up their cars and heat their homes, with higher costs likely hitting just before Election Day.
Disappointment, and we're looking at what alternatives we may have.
The move reverses a small increase in output OPEC Plus announced after President Biden's controversial trip to Saudi Arabia last summer.
The trip was not essentially for oil. The trip was about the Middle East and about Israel and rationalization of positions. But it is a disappointment, and it says that they're a problem.
President Biden directed the Department of Energy to release another 10 million oil barrels from the country's Strategic Petroleum Reserve next month, and is reportedly looking to resume purchasing oil from Venezuela, which would mean lifting sanctions imposed on the country for human rights abuses. For now, however, Americans are facing imminent higher prices.
It will affect, in the end, all of us by somewhere in the ballpark of 10 to 30 cents a gallon.
Kristalina Georgieva from the International Monetary Fund also claimed the global economy will likely get worse before it gets better.
High energy and food prices, tighter financial conditions, lingering supply disruptions decelerate growth. All of the world's largest economies are now slowing down.
The IMF once again lowered projections for global economic growth in 2023 and projected world economic growth lower by $4 trillion through 2026.
the global economy faces significant uncertainty.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen acknowledged continued interest rate hikes from the U.S. Federal Reserve are having negative effects outside the U.S.
Emerging markets in developing countries are often most acutely affected both by global shocks and by spillovers from the policies of advanced countries.
With rising gas prices coming soon, Republicans are encouraging President Biden not to turn to overseas producers, but to instead allow for more American oil and gas production and work towards energy independence. Reporting from Virginia, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Thanks, Abigail. We're turning now to Florida, where the death toll from Hurricane Ian is now at least 123 and climbing. Residents are still dealing with a loss of power and devastated homes, many of which were flooded. CBN's Operation Blessing has been helping people recover from the onslaught of one of the most powerful storms to ever hit the state. They went to the home of 77-year-old Mrs. Claire Boulier in Port Charlotte. She said OB's help was an answer to prayer. Volunteers helped remove debris from fallen trees and destroyed furniture. She added how grateful she is to Operation Blessing's partners for financially sending volunteers and staff members to her home, Gordon, in her time of need.
You can be a part of it. If you want to be a volunteer with Operation Blessing, volunteers are needed in Port Charlotte, Florida. Here's some conditions. You must be at least 18 years old, and it's just for local daytime volunteers only. We aren't able to provide overnight lodging. So if you're traveling there, if you have your own lodging and can make sure you're not an additional burden in that area, then great. We're looking for local volunteers, 18 years or older. So if you'd like to volunteer, you can call us, 1-800-730-2537, or you can go to and visit ob.org. And if you'd like to donate to help the relief effort, we have a special fund called the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. You can write to us at CBN Center in Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. Just put Disaster Relief Fund in the memo line of a check. You can call us with your gift, 1-800-700-7000. Just say, I want to give to disaster relief. There's a place on the website, cbn.com, where you can designate your gift. You can also text to give, OBDR, to 71777.